Welcome to this week's episode of Sojourner, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
Welcome back to the ongoing series, How Spaces Define Masculinity, a Black and Black-Biracial Men's Initiative. My name is Carol Jean Matthews-Shifflett, and I am the CEO of the Sojourner Group. I'd like to start by thanking my sponsors, the Utah Jazz, Planned Parenthood Association of Utah, Pacific Island Knowledge to Action Resource, PCAR, the Utah Coalition Against Sexual Assault, UCASA, and Enlightened Productions. Today, we're going to speak to millennials. How exciting. We have, first, Malijah Garfield. He is the director of the Black Cultural Center at the University of Utah, and his foundation years were spent in Rochester, New York. And then we have Brian McLeod, an educator, father, son, brother, friend, and a CHMC clinical intern. His foundation was spent in Salt Lake City, Utah. And lastly, we have Akibi Archer, PhD in MBA. He is an engineer, entrepreneur, and educator in Beltsville, Maryland, and his foundation years were spent in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Welcome to each of you. So for the young people online, I wanted to ask, at what age were you when you truly became aware of this thing called masculinity defined by society? And how did that work for you? How did that work against you? And how did you navigate those spaces of this newfound thing called masculinity defined by society? Go ahead and we'll start with you, Akibi.
Um,
What age?
so I would have to say it was when I really got a good understanding of it was in college. So I was probably, just around 19 or 20, and in college I was reading a lot. Um, just a lot about, Black history, Black culture, just being a African person and just some of the things that we dealt with through our history that kind of shaped how uh, men of African descent are in America. So I did have a lot of questions as to why things were the way they were, and there's there was a lot that I learned just through reading. So I would say about 19 or 20, and just learning about the experiences of other men, and then studying great men was a good way for me to learn, because nobody's perfect. Everybody has their the pros and cons about the way they live their life. When you're looking at a lot of our historical leaders and figures that we look up to are heroes, so we have to kind of pick the things that we want to choose from all of the people that we come in contact with. So it was probably in my early college years, I would say.
Okay. What about you, Brian?
Um, I mean, in hindsight, it was probably, right around when I was getting potty trained and was trying to figure that out. And I remember my uncle had shamed me when I was trying to learn, and I was like still sitting on it trying to pee. And he said, "Boy, don't you know that boys don't, pee standing up or something like that." And I remember I just shot up and I peed standing up ever since then. And that was probably like before my awareness, but I would say like high school, playing football and the culture surrounding football and subscribing to that. And then, in my 20s, I fought fire for 11 years, and just the masculinity, the dominant, the patriarchy that exists within that, shaped me throughout some formative years of my 20s. And then, I transitioned into teaching, and, I was around young people, and I would see how young people would, especially like middle schoolers, and they're entering this very important development stage. And that's a lot of times when their identity, is shaped and formed. And I would see that, like how my impact as a Black male educator can have just just by being there, but then even having conversations with young men has been really powerful as well.
Okay. So at a young age,
Yeah.
at a young age. What about you, Elijah?
Yeah, there was kind of like three stages in my life in which I think masculinity was kind of like put in front of me. One of those beginning stages was when I was 4, and several kids or other parents, it wasn't usually like my parents, but it was like other parents like, oh, why are you crying? Like, why are you crying? Boys don't cry. Or why are you doing this? Boys shouldn't be doing this. Or kind of what Brian was saying, stand up and pee. Or just these little like mannerisms that were taught to me at a young age. Like, you can't do this. You got to do it this way. You cannot do it the other way. But I'm like, the other way was easy though. Like, what? And so just like this persona, and at 4, just kind of learning these things. And they would ask you like, oh, Elijah, you got a little girlfriend yet? I'm like, I'm what? You're like 4 years old and they're asking you if you got a girlfriend. And I'm like, oh, wow. And then I think that the other 2 major life stones in my life, learning about masculinity, was when I joined the military, and all about this hoorah, men, we can do all we can do. Even at that time, women were not allowed in combat when I was in the military. So like, even with that, like, men, we go into combat, we do what we got to do. And then I think I learned about a more mature masculinity when I was in college, and I joined my fraternity, Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. And so being a Sigma just kind of crafted and molded me into being just a more mature masculine man. And, just in that instance, man.
So I'm going to ask you all, how do you feel about all those things that were done? Well, especially Brian and Akibi, those things that were said to you as a young child. How would you speak to a young child today? I mean, do you find yourself doing those things or saying those things to little boys, or how have you changed your language?
I think for me, it is just, recognizing what I longed for as a kid, and showing up for young people in general, and just, they see it, that young people are smart, and just modeling that, being present. Sometimes you don't have to say anything, you can just listen, just be a presence, be an adult presence. And if they don't have the language for it, you can help navigate them through that. But just walk with them, and if they're going down a road into the fire. I remember Jason Reynolds had talked about this in a podcast I was listening to, walking with young people, and, if they're going down a lane where they're walking into fire, you can pull at their coattails and redirect them, but then, nudge them into a different direction.
That's a little hard. That's a little hard. Don't you think that's a little hard these days? To try to grab them and nudge them into that different direction?
Yeah, but I think, yes, it is. Yes. And I think myself, and often the message that my pops would give me was like, boy, you hard-headed. And I was, but I turned out all right. So I think young turned out all right.
He's proud. Yeah. What about you, Akibi?
Yeah, so I think the way I kind of approach it is, just as saying, leading by example. And I think we want to, or we should strive to be the type of man that we want the young people to be. And, sometimes, just young people in general, even when I was younger, you don't always want to hear things, you don't always want to hear people telling you what to do or telling you what not to do. So, but if you can look at somebody and say, oh, that's cool. I want to do that, or I would like to be able to do these things. So I think leading by example is probably one of the best things. And I do think that at a very early age, both boys and girls get drawn into different directions. And I think for me, I think it's way too early the way it happens now. For example, girls will, they're kind of conditioned to not be good at certain things. Like I see it a lot in engineering, why there aren't a lot more Black women engineers. And I know tons of, Black women engineers. My wife is one, but I can look at a young age, look at the way young girls are treated and see that, okay, you're telling her not to play with certain type of toys, that could feed the way she thinks about building things or engineering. And likewise for young boys, right? We kind of like to guide them to certain things that we think are more, masculine when, like for me, I love to cook, all right? So, but young boys probably aren't being taught how to cook, at an early age. So I think, those are just some of the things we have to try to tackle.
Uh, My grandson wants to be an engineer, so I need to send him your way. He's always making something, always creating something.
Yeah.
Elijah.
Kind of taking that with what everyone else was saying. I think, no, I won't be sharing those sentiments in which I was told when I was younger. I think the biggest thing what I will be telling younger generations and my future kids is just like question everything. Question everything. Question, why are we doing this? And I mean, like, yes, it may be annoying to me as a parent in the future or whichever, but like, really question. I will never want to shoot down my child or any kid growing up, their curiosity. I don't ever want to shoot down the curiosity. And so making sure that I instill that culture of like, you should question everything. Should we be doing this pattern of what is defined as masculinity? I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but you should be questioning every single thing, questioning the society and how you are raised, but also how are you socialized into certain settings. And so
Mhm.
I will be instilling that. Yeah, question everything.
Okay. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to get into this nitty gritty question. I said, I started this because of all these murders of Black men and women, but it's just coming every single day. We wake up to something. So this is a twofold question. Do you believe that your masculinity as a Black man or as a Black biracial man poses a threat in society? And if so, tell me why. Who would like to take that question first? I see Brian moving towards the screen.
Uh, you know, the short answer is no. I don't feel that my Blackness poses a threat personally, but understanding that to a lot of systems out there it does, and as a recognition, my pops had to talk with me growing up, me and my sister, and one thing I did notice is I did go out into the world with my friends, and I had a lot of my peers in middle school and high school, even today, or darker skinned Black men. And when I would go out with them, I would recognize that, like, due to the lightness of my skin, the lighter skin tone of mine, that I would be approached differently in that context. Now, if I'm around my white friends, that changed. And so that's when I did recognize that, like, oh, I am seen as a threat, or even as an adult, in institutions which were predominantly white, seen as a threat. So this positionality, I guess, is what I'm speaking to right there.
Okay. Okay. All right. What about you, Elijah?
Yeah, I would go on the opposite of Brian. I really do feel that I am a threat. I'm a threat to the economic structure of this country. I'm a threat to the very socialization of Americans. I am a threat to the family structure. I'm a threat in of itself. I am just a threat. And I think that speaks volumes is because of my experiences. Even being in Utah, being an administration at the University of Utah, where I am even at the university questioned walking around like, why are you here? Why are you here? And so I think in a lot of instances, I pose a threat to the very fabric of our society because since the beginning of time, or even the founding of this country, we've been constantly told that Black men are evil. We're predators. We're monsters. We are all these different types of things, and it's kind of sad, but it's just like, yeah, I find it a threat. But I use that as a positive, though. I use that to some type of positivity because I'm like, okay, if you see me as a threat, then there's something I must be doing right. And so I kind of use that to my advantage in some instances. But yeah, I very much think we are a threat.
And you felt that way for quite some time, even in Rochester growing up. You
Yeah.
knew the spaces that you could maneuver in and the spaces that you were a threat in.
Yes, very much so. And that was like done at a very early age where kind of like Brian, um, kind of going to various different schools, but also I was in Catholic school for a good amount of my K through like middle school. And then I went to a public school for high school. And then understanding that even in those settings, like people like question, like, why are you here? Like, why are you here? You do not matter.
Mm.
And even in the instance of, like I said, back in Rochester, where the state of New York had stop and frisk, like they weren't questioning white boys walking around the streets. The people that were questioning was brown and Black men. They were questioning us on where we were going, why are we walking this way or going that way, and that was like instilled in me at a very young age. So I was just like, I questioned, like, yeah, everyone sees me as a threat. Yeah.
When you went to Catholic school, was it majority Black Catholic school, or was it pretty balanced, or was it a white Catholic school?
Oh, it was white.
Okay.
It was a white space, very white
What was
space.
the population, do you think, of
So it was kind of weird. So the population of the Catholic school was about like, I would say maybe like 10% Black and the rest white. And then I would go home and I'm living in a neighborhood where it's 40% Black. Everywhere I go, we got businesses, we own our neighborhoods and things of nature. You got grandma down the street and everything, but it's just like, it was like a conflicting atmosphere where you go home, you're meant to be something, but you go to different environments, you're not even valued. Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those, but why are you over here in this school? Because you don't really belong. Your type of people don't qualify to be over here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. All right, Akibi.
Just so the question
You
is,
want me to
do I? Oh yeah, go ahead.
read it? Do you believe that your masculinity as a Black man poses a threat in our society? And if so, why?
Yeah. So for that general question, I have to say no, just because we as Black people, we're a part of our society. So I don't think we're a threat to ourselves when we're doing things the right way. And I like to look at things through just from our perspective and our worldview. So yes, we are a threat to certain people in society and certain systems and certain structures, but in general, if we're a threat to society, I'd say no. I do think that there are, I'll just give a real quick example of I think I was in the 11th grade, and I was on my high school basketball team, and I used to have cornrows when I was in high school, and I probably had a chain, and I dressed a certain way. And I remember the first day of 11th grade, I walked into my AP calculus class, and being taught by a white woman at a majority Black school. And just out of the blue, she comes up to me and asks me if I'm sure I'm in the right class. Right. So just, straight up, she just said, "Hey, are you sure you're in the right class?" And I'm sure she just, looked at me, and there were other Black students in the class, but none of them were dressed the way I was or had cornrows in their hair. So, she just, had a certain assumption. So
Mhm.
for situations like that, and that's just a small micro example, but those situations happen all the time. And for me, I tend to ignore them as much as I can and just kind of try to, just live live my life through a viewpoint that will allow me to, just be successful and help my community and help my people. Because I do think that if we are constantly thinking about how to um, not seem like a threat or not to be um, overpowering or things like that, that will diminish our ability to nourish ourselves and be able to be the best person that we can be.
So, and what I should have said was mainstream society or the dominant, so-called dominant society. But what I'm hearing from you is you don't pay attention to that. You focus on Black culture. So you're not letting them, um, you're not
As,
giving them a voice. You're not giving them any space.
as much as possible in this country. That's what I try to do.
Anybody want to respond to that?
Yeah, a lot of what Akibi was saying reminds me of a quote from Bell Hooks when she said, "We can choose how to respond to acts of injustice." Like taking responsibility means that in the face of barriers, we still have the capacity to invent our lives, to shape our destinies in the ways that maximize our well-being. And thinking about my pops in our neighborhood, and he's the type of dude that he's always out in the line. He's always doing something. He's on the move. He's outside. He's always doing something. He's connecting with neighbors. But just seeing like how they would receive him initially, which was like, oh, dangerous Black man. But then when they got to talk to him, now as he's older and he's been here for a while, old neighbors come to see him like continuously, like that lived in old neighborhoods. That's, so I just saw how he would create, interactions in our white neighborhood oftentimes. And he did that with love and humor.
Mm.
And Malijah, you want to speak to that? I kind of because of all the murders and killing, I kind of tend to lean with Malijah. So I just kind of want to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more radical in that instance. And just because, like, I remember distinctly growing up where, like, in certain parts of town, you couldn't wear hoodies. Like, you couldn't even wear a hoodie walking around because, like, you are seen as something other. And so I just kind of grew this viewpoint of just like, I'm going to always be seen as a threat. So how do I take that threat and one, use it as a piece of confidence, turn it into confidence, as in like, yeah, I'm going to continue to be seen as a threat. So how did I project myself as, okay, you see me as a threat, but let me be a threat to everything, not just a threat of safety, but also a threat to your job. Let me be a threat to your paycheck. Let me be a threat to consultation and everything, you know? And so I've just embodied that persona of injecting confidence. But yeah.
So then I'm going to go back to the other two. Again, like I said before, I did this because I've seen all these murders. So do you feel that with all of these murders happening, why is the gun the first thing that's pulled out for these Black men? Why are we kneeling on people's necks? What is that?
I think about this book right here, My Grandmother's Hands,
Mm,
Wrestling Camp. He talks about it. He answers all those questions. It's reflexive, right? We're not seen as human. Black and brown bodies are not seen as human. So you're seen as dangerous. And so when you have a gun and it's reflexive, he gives so many examples in there about that, of like police training, but the lack of training on like, calming yourself in an interaction. Yeah, that book has
I
changed.
haven't. I just haven't read it yet.
Yeah,
Awesome. I've got a lot to read.
yeah.
Okay. What about you, Akibi? I mean, what is it that if we're not a threat to mainstream society or the dominant so-called dominant culture, why are these murders happening? And I mean, it's got to be affecting you all.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree with what Brian said. Is we're seen as less than. We're not seen as human, and that's from a historical perspective. If we look at history, it's this is not really anything new. Unfortunately, it's being publicized now. It's being pictures and videos are taken, but throughout our history in this country, this has been happening. And to be quite frank, it's there. If you look at our history, they're actually being nice now, right?
Mm.
Compared to some of the things that used to happen.
Explain
So,
that.
like just some of the, well, I won't assume, but if you look at the history, lynchings used to be a family event, right?
Mm.
They would bring their children to sit down and see a black man being hung or a black woman being hung. So the fact that um, these things are still happening today, but on a, I would definitely say more of society is not okay with it than they were before. So we have this this society has this underlying idea, just that black people are less than. So even with black children, I just know that certain things that I've seen online with police and black children, I just know that if they weren't black, they wouldn't have been treated that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When I was about 10 years old, my older brother and I, we were walking from our house to Walmart, which was probably about half a mile away, and we're just walking down the street, and about 5 or 6 police cars pull up. You know, they ask me if I have any ID. Like, I'm 10 years old. No, I don't have any ID. So what happened was one of my neighbors, she said that some money got stolen out of her house, and she looks out the window and she sees my brother and I walking by. So
Mm.
she called the police and told them. I don't know if she told them we did it or what happened, but they came, and I said, we explained, we do live in that neighborhood. I left my house, I walked by her house, and we were just walking to the store. We didn't have any large amount of money in us. And they actually they went and got another neighbor to drive by and us to see if I was telling the truth, that I do live in that neighborhood. Um, and it turns out that was the woman, it was her grandson who stole her money, a white lady. And so these things, we are treated in a way that is not right and not equal. So and then the police situation in America, just in general, has an entirely different, police in America are just different, right? And than in other places. I've just seen them handle things in other countries in ways that I just couldn't fathom happening here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, because that's not, police aren't really trained to de-escalate situations or to not use lethal force. A lot of these officers, they enjoy that they're able to follow their training and kill people,
Mm.
right? Because that's what they're trained to do.
So this is what I call a threat, but you don't call that a threat. What do you call that? Fear? History?
Yeah, I would say a historical fear. Um, and in some cases, it is a threat, right? So we can be like our unity as a people can be a threat to certain systems in America. Just for example, that when we start to unify against the economic system, you know, Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and North Carolina, some of these places, they were threats to the financial structures of those cities. So we definitely can be. I just in history, I just like to think about the things that we could have accomplished if we weren't always
Mm-hmm.
worried about what we had to prove to other people and to prove that we were equal, right? So we've
Okay.
accomplished some amazing things, even in the face of, trying to prove that we are equal.
Okay. Anybody want to feed off of that one? I'm Elijah. Go ahead. I see you.
I feel it, brother. I feel it. I don't agree. I don't know. And the only reason why I say that is because what is it, the Supreme Court case, Dred Scott versus Stanford, in which Justice Taney, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at the time, during that Supreme Court case, deemed us not human. And so from there, like, we've had to prove that we were human. Like, we can't, I have to focus on it. I have to focus on improving that I am something more and even above what the standard is, or even proving that I'm even more than them, because they have deemed us through law, through lynchings, through black codes, through all these different things in life, through our justice system, through these various different pieces of legislation. They have deemed us as not human. They have deemed us as, and so how do you go from, you kind of have to project that, because you go from being property to, okay, now you're human. You're not property anymore. You're not something that we will hold in our house or something. You're now human. But from there, from that point on, since we've been defined as human, we've had to prove that we're more than human. And so I think there's a lot that goes into that. And I think that we have to prove, we have to show. And I think in that instance, that also leaves a fear, but also us as seen as a threat, because we've been able to transcend from being property to something that is close to God. And so it's like, how can white people fathom that? They're gonna see us as a threat, because we've been changed from something and became even more. And so I think that's in that very essence of that, we're gonna be continued to see it as a threat, and we have to combat that. But yeah.
We're not done with this. So I mean, because this is a lot. I mean, I see what Malaja's saying, and I also understand what Akibi's saying. So, and Brian, I think you're kind of leaning towards what Akibi's saying. It's almost like you're not going to own it. Is that what it is?
Well, I just think we, and I agree with what Malaja was saying, where this is how they see us, right? But I guess I'm more concerned with building our own rather than the proving. So if someone comes to your house and says, you know, your house is ugly, right? I don't have to just come out and prove to them that it's not. You know, I'm just gonna focus on what I'm doing inside of my house. And I think that proving that can be a result of building our own, right? So I think so an example I like to think about is we need to focus on solving community problems. So a lot of us in our society tend to, want to go to college, but to do what? To to get a good job, to do what? To make good money and all these things. So even if we're not doing it directly, we're proving that we're smart and we're capable and that we can do these things. But I think we can also focus on the problems in our community. So using our skills to benefit our community, which is not necessarily proving that we can do things to mainstream society, but we are able to focus and say, okay, this is what I'm going to use my skills to do. I don't care if it's deemed as not productive or not that I'm wasting my skills and not doing certain things, but this is what I want to focus on. So I don't know if it's just different definitions per se, but I just think the proving, at least for me, is just it can lead us to kind of want to replace ourselves into this system that wasn't designed for us. So we had some back in the day when our people were enslaved, we had some Black people that wanted to prove that they could be good overseers, right? Mm-hmm. And take that role. But to me, that's not a good thing to prove that you can do.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Anybody want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I would just say, and then I want to have Brian also speak. But I would also say I agree with that. I agree that we should be building a community. We need to focus on that. But as far as in just the analogy that you put with the house, and if someone calling your house ugly, I don't even think it's that. The problem was they didn't even allow us to get a house.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you go from, forget the house being called ugly, they didn't even allow us to have a house. And if we did have a house, like, oh, you got a house? Let me burn that shit down. And so you, in a way, you've had to kind of like, you had to prove that you can even have property, that you can even have the idea of even having those things. Because, and yes, in the instance that, yes, you shouldn't be trying to prove to people, I'm like, and it goes to even keeping up with the Joneses. You shouldn't have to be proving to people what you have and things of that nature. But in the very essence, throughout time, we have been told, and not even told, we've been shot at, burned down, assassinated. We've been, us trying to build something, our community, us trying to build communities. We've seen throughout history that they're like, oh, you're trying to do something? We're trying to follow your way of thought. Okay, well, we're gonna come up here with some with guns, bombs, and everything. We're gonna destroy what you were trying to build. And so we just kind of have to constantly prove that. But yeah.
Okay. All right. Brian, you were called out by Malaysia. Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, and just adding to the initial question of like, do I see myself as a threat? Yes, I've been in spaces where I've, experienced that only Black faculty member or whatever. But I agree with both what Malaysia and Akibi has said, but internally, in like how I need to show up, right, in my well-being, going back to the Bell Hooks quote, like I do not see myself as a threat.
Okay.
That's what I have control of day to day, moment to moment.
That's what you have control of, you said?
Day to day, moment to moment.
Okay.
What am I telling myself?
What are you telling yourself?
What am I telling myself?
As opposed to how you're being treated.
Right, because racism is going to exist. Racism is going to exist for the next generation and the next generation, right? So how am I going to interrupt it for myself, right? And how am I going to show up? And then how am I going to do that for my kids and the young people that I'm around? So although, yes, I will walk with Malaysia and I will walk with the Kibi, but I also have to walk within too.
Good. I like that. I like that. Okay. So, so reflecting on your past, if there were anything you would tell yourself about this ideology of masculinity, then and now, what would it be? What would you say to yourself? And we can throw in that, what would you say to a young boy right now? We have a lot of young, I would say teenagers who are conflicted in America with this idea of masculinity, as we were talking about earlier. Masculinity means you gotta be in a gang, you gotta have a gun, you gotta act a certain way. What would you say to yourself as a young person and to a young person? We'll go ahead and start with Brian.
What I say to a young person, I think it goes back to, a lot of like what Malaysia had talked about in questioning, everything. They feel like they have to show up that type of way. And it's about building relationships. That changes a lot. You can build a relationship with a young person, be interested, be curious. And then you can get to the questioning of their motivations behind why they need to show up. Again, modeling, Akibi had mentioned that, about a lot of it is in the action of how I show up in spaces too, which is continuous. Like, it's continuous work, it's hard. I think ultimately is building that relationship, having them question things for themselves, and the world at large. I'll think more on it, so if we can come back to it, but that's
Yeah, because I was going to actually add to that, society puts a lot of pressure on this word masculinity and boys.
Yeah.
Um, so, that is not healthy for
Mm-hmm.
them. So we're creating more problems that way. So we can move on and we can come back to you if you'd like.
I think too is just if to all of us have spoke about messages that were given to us about don't cry, stand up when you all those things, but interrupting that for myself, and then again just being present, being attentive, being curious with the young man about what it is to be masculine for them, and is that for you, or are you doing that because of that's what the overarching masculinity that exists as being even a lot of times covertly shoved down and put in our face, and so just having them look at that, I think, is important.
Okay.
It's
Right.
everywhere.
Brian, I'm sorry, Elijah.
I would say to kind of tell a younger person today, or even if rather to be today, or if I was just younger coming up today, or rather it's my son or whoever, I would really tell them, like, look, you really have to ask yourself, even with how I'm raising you, or if I'm a mentor to you, or just a friend to you, question, what does it mean to be masculine in today's time? What does that mean? Like, question that, because you can get several different messages today. The internet, you have a computer in your pocket. You can find everything up on masculinity. And so, asking yourself at a young age, what does that mean to you? Encompassing what does that mean to you? Questioning everything that is around you, everything. Do not just blindly go in, and that you don't have to be disruptive. You don't have to be disorderly. You don't have to have civil disobedience or not, but just question. Simply just ask questions to people, your mentors, your father, the men that are around you, even the women that are around you. Question, like, ask those questions, like, okay, so why are we asking that? And then from there, I would say, like, read. I think in a lot of times we take that for granted. The literacy rates in this country are terrible. The amount of our youth actually attaining a college education is not over 50%. So we're all these people that don't get further education, but also just don't read in a lot of instances because of literacy rates. And so I would say encouraging them to read up on the various different types of Black men throughout times, whether that be people like James Baldwin or W.E. Du Bois, or reading up on just various different people, even Jesus. Just understanding these different perspectives of what it meant to be, and also questioning and putting into context the men that they had to be during that time. So understanding that what it meant for them to be during that time is going to be different for you during this time because things have advanced. But just always question, and then ask those questions to people that will foster those conversations. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. And that kind of moved into the next question. So thank you for answering, both of you. Akibi.
Yep. So I I agree with Elijah was saying, question everything. Um, I I was reading something one time, and a father was talking to his son. And he said, question everything, and the son asked, even authority, and he said, especially authority,
Mm,
right? So you definitely want to question things. And one thing I would tell myself, as early as possible, to develop a good sense of discipline, because I think as men, at least for me, this is very important, because I think discipline is one of the lacking factors in our society. Um, People in general are not short of ideas of things to do, or the desire to do better, but the lack of discipline to get those things done, I think, is a huge factor in just developing, as a man, because there may be things that we want to do that we know we should do, but we just don't have the discipline to get it done.
Okay. Okay. I had a question earlier that I missed, and it was for you, Akibi. This person doesn't know much about Jamaican culture, but they said when you were talking about your philosophy on not being a threat because you don't concentrate on mainstream, they were wondering if that you were influenced by your Jamaican culture and upbringing. Is that why you don't feel as a threat? And she said, once a British colony, now an independent nation state versus American culture and suppression.
Um, I guess it would be hard for me to pinpoint it, but I tell people we sometimes look at I kind of have a unique experience. Both of my parents were Jamaican. I spent a lot of time in Jamaica, but I was born and raised here in America, and I've actually done quite a bit of traveling throughout Africa. So I have just different perspective on things. But Jamaica is, while it's a majority Black country, people don't know that the head of state, the highest person in power in Jamaica, is the Queen of England, right? So Jamaica is still a Commonwealth country, and a lot of those things are still perpetuated throughout, Jamaican society. There's, it's probably not as mainstream outside of Jamaica and the Jamaican diaspora, but it was a very big case just this last week where a young girl, the school that she was going to, said that she couldn't go to the school because she had dreadlocks.
Oh, I
Right.
see that.
And
Yes.
the Supreme Court said that the school didn't violate her rights because the law says that they were allowed to do that. Right. So it's I wouldn't necessarily say it's because of Jamaican culture, because a lot of these things happen, throughout the Caribbean, throughout Africa as well. So it is a different experience living in a majority Black country versus living in America, because I remember one of my friends, first time he went to Jamaica, he was amazed. He said, everywhere I went, there are Black businesses, there are Black bank managers, there are Black professors. Like, it was just a plethora of Black people doing things. So I guess seeing that, you don't have that question in your mind of what we can achieve that some people here might experience. But yeah, I don't think it's necessarily because of that. I just think it's and maybe I just can't handle it. It's just too much to be worried about what other people think. I just don't have the time and energy to combat that.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I just saw that article about the young lady who, the higher court said she cannot wear dreadlocks, and it just made me think how much you don't know our history, you don't know what goes into doing our hair, and that was really disturbing. I just don't even know how it's legal, but
Yeah,
it is. It just drives me crazy.
yeah.
So what would you all, and if anyone has questions, go ahead and put your questions in now. I was going to ask the panel what would they like for listeners to take away from today, or if they have anything else to add to this conversation. We'll go ahead. Akibi, since you're online, let's go.
um, I guess I would say for young people or just people in general, it's it is a balancing act that we have to do, especially in school. Um, there's a song that I like by Dead Prez where they talk about the need to take two sets of notes. All right. So when you're in school, you need to take a set of notes that, just because we are in this system and we have to navigate it, that will allow you to pass that test. But you also need to take a set of notes where that's for you and your community and your people. All right. So that's something that I think is very important. When I was in school, in college specifically, you wouldn't catch me without a book that I was reading. If I'm at the bus stop, I'm reading a book. But that was outside of my engineering curriculum, right? It had nothing to do with what I was doing in school, but I was just, hungry for that knowledge. And this is where that two sets of notes that you're unfortunately have to focus on.
So the importance of reading.
Yeah.
Okay. Brian.
I would say that too, and I wanted to thank you for getting us together in this space. And then in December, I went to a conference, People of Color conference for educators, and I went to a workshop with over 100 Black male educators. Now, I mean, this is a glimpse of it, but I've never felt so safe and connected in my life, just being in that space. And then the identities were unique in terms of being male, being a teacher, being Black. So even just being in this space and talking to these two other gentlemen and you, there was glimpses of that. And so if I'm thinking of young people, like, start to look for those spaces, because I mean, for me, growing up in Utah, that was hard to find. It was hard to find. But as much as possible, try and stay connected with your community. And again, get curious, with things, with yourself, with the larger scale things around you. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Thank you for coming on. Malaysia.
I would say to tell people, especially in this time, that if you don't see a community, create it. Create something in which can be fostered if you do not see it. And I think, especially in this time where there's problems that are faced with Black masculinity and even Black men in general, understanding the fact that just statistically, Black men or minority men in general, they don't retain in college. Like, we have low retention rates of Black men, minority men. And so really, how do we create from a young age a fostering an environment in which Black men can thrive? And kind of attesting to Brian, you probably felt very safe in that environment because it was something that was foreign. We didn't experience it that much. Even being here in Utah, like, I don't see that as much as in Black men really coming together and creating something meaningful in which we can transcend generations. So I really think if we come together, and if we don't even have to come together, we all should just take the initiative and our spark in our mind to create something. Create the environment in which you feel like you are not fostering in. And I have to take my own advice and do that myself as well. But yeah, just do that. Do that. And then on top of that, we need to speak up about everything that is going on. Speak up about Black women, speak up about Black men, speak up about toxic masculinity. Need to speak up on everything and anything. And so with that, making sure that we speak up of all these ills and also the goods that are going on, and then educating those that are coming up underneath us. But yeah.
Thank you. Because I agree with that. What affects one of us affects all of us. And so we have to come together. This is not, healthy masculinity is not a man's issue. Sexual assault, domestic violence is not a woman's issue. This is something that we all have to come together for and speak about. When Akibi was talking about, I like the way you said that. I don't have time to worry about them. Maybe we need to teach young people not to make that a part of their space. Worry about you, worry about your community, because if we worry about them, because I was with Malaysia on this one, if we worry about what other people are saying, then it's just going to bring us down more and more, and we'll never grow. So I want to thank you for that. I want to let everybody know that we're going to be sending you a survey. This has been wonderful. What's been really great has been talking to a different generation. And if you all know some people, we would love to hear from more young men in the millennial generation. And I want to just share with you that we now have a YouTube channel that'll also be on the survey. So if you could help us get 1,000 subscribers by sharing, what we'll be doing is putting out one section of, one part of each webinar once a week. So about 20 minutes of each webinar, and you can just keep following us so that you don't have to spend an hour and a half to 2 hours just listening to one webinar. So I will be sharing that on the survey as well. I want to thank you, gentlemen. I want to thank our sponsors again, the Utah Jazz, Planned Parenthood Association of Utah, Pacific Island Knowledge to Action Research, which is PCAR, and the Utah Coalition Against Sexual Assault, and Enlighten Productions, who is doing the YouTube videos for us. So any last words? This has been great.
There was a question that came up just about mentorship and being a mentee, or, it seems like a lost cause. And, there's a couple programs out there. I think Barack Obama has one that I've jumped on. But I think it is because although, yes, my father was present, it was often those out of the home mentors, whether it was official or not, that were really important and shaped a lot of like who I am today and continue to shape who I am.
Yeah, that's true. So if you know of any mentor programs, you can always give it to me and I will share it. Or if you know anything right now in your community, in your area, Akibi in Maryland, Malaysia, in Rochester, and in Salt Lake, and also you, Brian, please, you can share it right now, or you can share it with me later in an email. But we need to, I'm going to say this. I remember my sister was on the Metro once in DC, and she saw some young boys acting up. And she wrote an ad about this. What bothered her was that not one Black man said anything to these children. She did. She actually told them that your mother would like to see you come home tonight, or your parents would like to see you come home tonight. That's so important. I've asked men, why don't you speak up? And they've said to me, because we don't want to get killed. And that's a reality, so I won't take that away from them. But what are we going to do to speak up to help young men come along? So,
yeah, I'd like to just quickly speak on that mentorship question.
mm-hmm.
To me, the mentorship was very important, especially throughout my college years. There were, a lot of mentors. There's this organization called the National Society of Black Engineers, where we have over probably like 25,000 members now. We're just all Black engineers, men and women. And I had a lot of mentors in that organization that helped me just navigate the space of college and being an engineer and a career. And I don't think it's a lost cause. I think it may have to change. Just some of my mentees, we connected on other things first, right? So it's not just directly getting down to the nitty gritty. Maybe for weeks and weeks we're just playing sports, playing basketball, just kind of building that rapport. But I do think it's definitely important to the young people, and they want to see examples that they can follow of people being successful in whatever they choose to do. So I think the mentorship is definitely important.
I remember my father once saying, children act like they don't like discipline, but it shows them that somebody loves them. So same thing with mentorship. They may act like it, but it does show them that they are cared about. So thank you again. This has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and sharing with people, and send me some more men, please.
All right. Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. Thank you. Have a good week.
Stay tuned for the next episode on How Spaces Define Masculinity, a Black and Black-Biracial Men's Initiative.